Welcome back to the Gentleman's Gazette. In today's video, we'll be uncomplicating watch complications by going through the 4 main ones that you need to know, plus a bonus. The world of wristwatches can be super confounding, from super long product codes to different variants and a ton of technical information. It's very easy to brand those who love watches a watch nerd. Nerd! Now, a really big part about what draws people to this complex world of watches is the complications that the watches have themselves. And today, we'll be diving deep into these complications so you can have a better understanding about what's going on. So whether you're a seasoned pro in the watch game or you're just dipping your toes in the water, hopefully this video will help you learn more and have a greater understanding so when you buy a watch with complications, you know what they do. And all the while, we hope that we are able to cast aside any confusion when it comes to complications. Whew, I really hope there aren't this many tongue twisters today. Now, if you're a longtime viewer, you already know that we made a video a while back about watch movements, and you can check that out here. It's a perfect companion to this video. So what's the difference, you might ask, between a complication and a movement? Well, quite literally, the movement is what makes your watch tick, just like the engine that drives and powers your car. And if we stick with the automotive metaphor, the complications on a watch are like your turn signals or your windshield wipers. It's something that the watch or the car has that serves a function and a purpose. Now, watchmaking is inherently complicated. Before human beings were able to tell the time on their wrist, time was usually displayed publicly in a town square or on a large clock. These public displays of time made sense practically because the clocks were run with weights and counterweights, which you really couldn't keep on your wrist or in your pocket. This all changed in 1510 when German inventor Peter Hinlin invented a system of coiled springs and gears that allowed telling time to be miniaturized. This invention is widely regarded as the birth of the watch's mainspring, which is the engine which powers the mechanical heart of the watch. At this point in time, taking the power from that one little mainspring into the hour, minutes, and second hands of a watch would have required a ton of engineering. So it's funny to think that the fundamentals of a timepiece today would have been considered a complication back then. It's still very important to mention, though, because even in watchmaking today, when new features and complications are added, they still have to work around the original movement, which we can see in the past, and it carries over today. Now, watchmaking has come a long way since 1510, and over the years, we've seen a treasure trove of complications come through in various watches and pocket watches. With the crown of the most complicated watch going to the Vacheron Constantin 57-260, which has a staggering 57 complications. And by the size of it, it probably isn't all that user-friendly. Now, without a doubt, this is an incredible display of watchmaking skill, but you have to ask yourself, do you really need that many complications? Or does it make life more complicated? Granted, this Vacheron Constantin is not designed to be an everyday piece, so rather let's look at some complications that you will use and you should know. First up is sort of the most universally recognized complication, which is the date. This type of complication takes on many different forms and configurations. There's the date window, a particularly famous feature on Rolex watches, highlighted by the magnifying lens set into the crystal. The next evolution would be a day-date display, which, as the name suggests, give you both the day of the week as well as the date. You can also find pointer date watches, where a pointer hand highlights the date according to markers around the dial. A subdial date would be a similar version of a pointer date watch and can even be used in this configuration to show the month of the year, which brings us to calendar complications, which are essentially date complications that showcase a greater level of calendar detail, such as the day, date, month, and even the year. So, however it's displayed, I'm sure you've seen a date complication before. After all, they're not exclusive to luxury watches. You can find them even in this little Casio here. Having the date visible on your watch can be a huge benefit, whether it's for filling out the date on a check or making sure you're taking your right medication. It's really useful. I know we have this information more readily than ever before. Simply unlock your phone and you have access to the day and date. This is, of course, the age of smart technology, which reminds me, make sure you're watching this in full screen because I don't spend all morning getting ready and doing my hair for you to watch this in thumbnail mode. So full screen. So my point is, there's no denying that there's a reduced need for a watch now, but if you wear one, it's because you want to wear it. Plus, you'll also be covered when your tech inevitably runs out of battery. And in my personal experience, it's much easier to have the date readily available on your wrist than having to dig through your pocket for your phone. Also, that could be the reason why the pocket watch fell out of favor. Keep in mind that although date complications are very useful, having that design can sometimes make the watch less dressy, but not in all occasions. There's some really nice date windows out there. The key is to look for a date complication that isn't too flashy, loud, or takes up too much of the dial, so maybe leave those date complications for more casual watches. Our next complication is the dual time zone. This is characterized by a second-hour pointer. It sets apart the current time and a second time zone. What's commonly known as a GMT watch is a dual time complication. GMT stands for Greenwich Mean Time after the time zone itself. And there is some variation in dual time watches. You can find dual time complication watches that are powered by the same movement. The World Time Zone complication, which has 24 time zones of the world's major cities on an internal rotating bezel. And there's a variation of the GMT complication with either fixed or independent hour pointers. So what's the dual time zone for? This type of complication really lends itself to those that are traveling constantly and who are jet set flying around the country and the world, whether it's for leisure or for business. Or it's useful for business people who do business overseas while based in their own home country. So if you're anything like Raphael and I, who have vendors overseas that we work with every day, this is a really useful complication to have. We also have members of our Gentleman's Gazette team that are spread through different time zones. Jack, for instance, is in the UK. So Raphael, do you want to get us all GMT watches? Maybe the Pepsi or the Batman? How about it? One thing to keep in mind about dual time zone watches is that they can be very hard to dress up, especially if they have a rotating bezel. After all, the reason behind this complication is entirely practical. And even if you avoid the more sporty GMTs, just keep in mind that the dressy versions still can look pretty complicated on the dial, so it's not a true and perfect classic dress watch. Up next is a titan of sports watch complications, which is the chronograph. The chronograph is most firmly focused on measuring time. The multiple subsidiary dials of a chronograph are there to measure elapsed time with great accuracy. For this reason, there are many famous iterations of chronograph watches. Tag Heuer has both the Monaco and Carrera chronograph watches in their collection, with international style icon Steve McQueen showcasing the Monaco in the film Le Mans. The Rolex Daytona boasts a long wait time for purchase, as well as an impressive six-figure plus price point at auction, probably something to do with being known as the Paul Newman watch. And of course, there's the Omega Speedmaster, perhaps the most iconic chronograph in history, but hey, I'm not biased. Much like there isn't one set way to display a date window, there's different ways to display a chronograph on a timepiece. But it's safe to say you're likely to find 2 or 3 subdials. These subdials can measure a variety of different units of time. Chronograph watches can also feature other complications, such as a date window or a dual time zone, and this altogether makes them a very practical watch. Another feature commonly seen on a chronograph is a tachymeter scale. This measures units usually in miles per hour or kilometers per hour, and it can be found on the inner or outer bezel of the watch. On the Omega Speedmaster, it's on the outer bezel. This makes sense if you understand the history of the Speedmaster, which you can watch our video on that here, but the Speedmaster originally started off as a racing watch, so having a watch that would time miles per hour makes perfect sense. Due to their functional nature, they work really well as sports watches, although if you look at some really elegant references from Patek Philippe or Jaeger-LeCoultre, they can work really well as dress watches. Just keep in mind, as we've said many times before, if you add a chronograph to a dress watch, it can make the dial look more complicated and a little bit less elegant. So the scriptwriter is having me say that I should want to have a chronograph over a dive watch. I'm not sure that I agree with that, so skip. Overall, a chronograph is a great complication to have on a sports watch or a dressier watch, so I would highly recommend you add one to your collection. Perhaps the most aesthetically pleasing complication out of all of them is the Moonphase. Now, this complication was originally used by sailors to track the changes in the ocean's tides, but essentially a Moonphase complication shows the various cycles of the moon's path. For as long as mankind has tracked time, we've always needed something to track it against. And it's pretty incredible to think that despite all of the technology that governs our day really starts and ends with the sun and the moon. So it's safe to say that timekeeping and the moon have been linked since the very beginning, which is why it feels pretty natural to see this complication on a wristwatch. Now, many of us might see this complication as useless or don't feel the need, but having a Moonphase complication sets you apart in an increasingly casual world. It's also equally rare to see a Moonphase by itself. Usually they're accompanied by a host of other complications, typically displayed along a dual time zone, a chronograph, or a sub-second. This does mean that Moonphase complications tend to be on the pricier side of things. After all, adding more complications is more work that the watchmaker has to do, which increases his time and the cost. If you invest in elegant design and craftsmanship and you appreciate the Moonphase complication, safe to say you have friends here at the Gentleman's Gazette. And finally, we came to our bonus complication, the tourbillon. As I've previously mentioned, watches are made up of hundreds of tiny mechanical parts. And for most of watchmaking history, watches have some sort of accuracy tolerance. Things like how the watch is positioned can affect its accuracy, as gravity will play an effect on the small gears and cogs inside. For some context, the development of the tourbillon watch began in 1795. And the first tourbillon was patented by Abraham Louis Breguet in 1801. Now, this was the age of pocket watches, so they were either stored upright or laid on a flat surface. What the tourbillon does is take those regulating components, including the balance spring, and escapement, and houses them in a cage. This cage has the ability to rotate separately from the movement, therefore gravity is affecting the cage and not the components inside. Now, there's a lot of, let's say, heated debate in the watch community about the tourbillon and whether or not it does a great deal affecting the watch's accuracy. And to complicate things further, there's debate about whether or not it should be classified as a complication. And because it doesn't really add anything functional to the dial, we added this as our bonus item. Regardless, the tourbillon is not a common sight in watchmaking, as it takes an incredible amount of time and detail to construct. For this reason, a watch with a tourbillon is typically going to be expensive, which is why you'll pretty much see it proudly displayed as part of the watch's design. So while owning a watch with a tourbillon is for the serious connoisseur, all the rest of us can watch and marvel over the watchmaking and mechanical expertise. At the end of the day, whether your watch has several complications or none, just know that there's a sheer variety out there, and there is definitely a complication for you. See, that wasn't so complicated. In today's video, I'm wearing a rather casual outfit. My family just moved houses, and this is what I found in a box, so this is what I wore. It's sort of my last-ditch effort to get some of my fall-winter pieces in, as it's starting to heat up here in Minneapolis. I'm wearing a brown tweed overshirt from Spear & McKay, a simple gray t-shirt, dark blue denim jeans, and a pair of brown or earth tone sneakers from Suit Supply that tie in with the brown of the overshirt. And I'm wearing a pair of Fort Belvedere socks in this gray color because they're dark and it matches well with my jeans. Many of the watches shown in this video were sent over by Federico at DelReyWatch.com. We really thank him for sending these over. The video is not sponsored, but we really appreciate him helping us out. If you're interested in learning more about watches or any of the videos we've done, there's links down in the description. Also, if you want to check out any of our Fort Belvedere products, that's down there as well.